I went to my doctor, and he just refused to listen to me.
Scott, how did you find Carnivore?
Well, first, Dave, thanks for having me on. I really love what you're doing with your channel. I think personal testimonials are such a inspiring and succinct way for people to learn about how to reduce the needless suffering in their lives. So I came upon Carnivore by way of witnessing my wife have a nearly miraculous health transformation. It happened in like 10 days. She had experienced a lot of suffering from gut issues, stemming from gut issues. So she had daily severe pain for over a decade and had accompanying symptoms. I'm authorized by her to talk about all this, by the way, because we both have been involved with Carnivore. But her story was pretty profound, and she wants people to know about this. That being Carnivore, just we look around us, and there's so many people suffering and unhealthy and overweight and with joint problems and this problem and that problem. And health is really personal. People don't really want to talk about it out in the open, so it's kind of the secret suffering that everyone has around us. And it's like regardless of age too, which is just really tragic, because some of the best years of people's lives just spent in the doldrums or suffering overtly. It's just, yeah, it's really tragic. So when I saw the outcome that she had in such short time, I think we both just got really, it's hard for us to not tell people. I think a lot of folks in our position that have experienced the benefits understand that it can be really difficult, because it's easy to be annoying or be ideological about it. I think a lot of people think that it's extreme or ideological, or, oh, that's great, it worked for you, but it could never work for me, all these sorts of things. And I arrived in the place where I think that every human being would benefit from knowing what the human body is able to use for fuel and how the different things we put in our bodies, how they affect us. So back to my wife, she was suffering every single day. She had body aches all over for years. She had eczema so bad that her skin would crack open, and she had to wear cotton gloves to bed at night because her skin would be all cracked, and and she would itch it in the middle of the night. She had night terrors, severe fatigue, very severe depression. She was cold all the time. I mean, she was just kind of generally miserable. I listened to a lot of content online. So I've always loved to learn, did very well in school, and I just sort of carry that on. I have a job that allows me to listen while I work. So I listen to, lectures and interviews and, science topics and this and that. And I was listening to a lot of Jonathan Haidt and Eric Weinstein and Brett Weinstein and Jordan Peterson about just other topics. And I think because of that, Michaela Peterson's channel came up, and that's a reoccurring theme from people on your channel, I feel like. And I saw an interview that she did with 3 people. We can't find the interview anymore, but she interviewed 3 people that had pretty severe health problems, and they're all telling their story of how, Carnivore, and in this case, I think it was Lion Diet, probably with her, mitigated or resolved these different health problems. And my wife had tried everything. And I sent it to her, showed it to her, and and said, you should just try this. Like, what do you have to lose? It seems pretty intense. But she kind of looked into it and researched, and for I think a month or two before she did it, got informed and learned as much as she could and approached it really um, responsibly, and kind of went into it knowing as much as she could what how this was going to work and what the idea behind it was, and yeah, so she did just grass-fed beef, salt and water for initially she was just going to do 30 days, I think, or maybe she was set out to do 90 days. In less than 2 weeks, she just had a completely, I mean, it was like nearly miraculous transformation. Just everything, her whole life changed, and therefore my life changed, our life together changed. I think, when if people think we're beating this drum a lot or telling friends and family about it or something, it's because it was just so life changing. She went from being in pain every day to not being in pain at all. The eczema went away. The night terror, she used to have night terrors. They were just gone, never again. And this has been over 3 years now. The depression just dissolved, just gone. She would be just freezing cold all the time, totally gone. Like all of these symptoms just sort of vanished so quickly.
And the changes were all they started in earnest in 2 weeks.
Yeah. She had a lot of gut problems and was just sort of bloated and puffy and achy and just all the time. And then I remember I was on the couch and she came out to the living room and she said, "Look," and she showed me her belly, and it was just flat, just flat. And she was like smiling and happy. And, I had seen her like struggling for so long just to smile or just to have the energy to get through the day or, just basic stuff. And, and yeah, it was just the turnaround. And then of course she kept doing the Lyme diet and had to tweak things and adjust things a little bit with electrolytes or whether or not to consume a little bit of carbohydrates or this and that, and then eventually started to add in some other things so she wasn't just doing beef every day. And now she's able to eat, we eat a lot of different things. She even has some seasonal stone fruit or pickled or things. But the beginning part of her experience was just beef, salt, and water, because her situation was just at the point where she needed to do something kind of drastic. And I guess from my point of view, just seeing that, my first thought was like the same, I think, as a lot of people think when they hear about carnivore, that, they think, once again, they think like, that's extreme, that's crazy, or it's purely ideological, or it's a fad, or that's great, but it would never work for me. And I even sort of thought that, because I thought, okay, here's Michaela Peterson with this very extreme situation with like arthritis and bone replacements, and and then my wife with this suffering for so long. And so I thought, the same as others, I just thought like, well, that's great, it worked for her, but it's, I'm not going to just eat meat. So I kept eating an assortment of things, and I think just being, living with her, and she does a lot of cooking. She works from home, so she always has, it's fantastic. I come home and there's like bacon and all this great food. So she's doing a lot of the cooking. So I think I just lost the vegetables, kind of came off my plate just by attrition. Like I just sort of stopped. At a certain point, I was like, I was down to like meat and sweet potatoes and Swiss chard or something. And the sweet potatoes always just made me feel like full and tired, and I just wanted more of them. And then the chard is just, doesn't sit well. And I'm like, what? Right? I don't know if I really need these. So, but uh, I had some, I had a kind of a long history of dietary experimentation in my own experience. And I think of carnivore now as like a fantastic, just like the ultimate elimination diet, where you can just get to the basics. I think our bodies and our environment and everything that can affect how we feel physically and mentally is so complicated. The world around us and all the different cause and effect that's going on with our body and our mind. Um, so I think it's really helpful, even if you're not struggling with some major illness, if you just have general malaise or fatigue or whatever it is. I think it's useful just to get down to some sort of foundational, simple level of where you can sort of start to find out what's causing what. Because cause and effect is just always functioning, but it's just that there's so many cause and effect relationships happening over top of one another. I think it just becomes a mess. And I had done a bunch of different dietary experimentation throughout my life. And I had noticed, like, I stopped eating wheat almost 20 years ago. And that was that just had huge ramifications. Like, positive ones. I mean, it was like a fog lifted. I had tremendous brain fog and I didn't even realize it. I was always tired, sleepy. My face was achy. My sinuses always hurt. And I stopped eating wheat and it just sort of lifted. And I guess that was sort of a window into how diet can really have a big effect. That and growing up, I had a lot of allergies and was sick a lot, and ear infection, sinus infection, and throat infection, and allergies and allergies and allergies. And I had my tonsils removed. They wanted to put tubes in my ears because my sinuses were swollen all the time, and so that would have been like 2 surgeries as a child, which just in retrospect seems like, children having surgeries to try to help chronic infection seems extreme to me, not eating carnivore. So I had a lot of really unfortunate experiences with medical institutions. And I guess as a caveat, like, I have friends and family who work in medical institutions, and it's populated with wonderful people, and people who are altruistic, want to help people, but I mean, there are issues with the institutions themselves, which we don't have to open the can of worms. But I think people are probably a little familiar, and viewers of your channel. But I had a lot of bad experiences with the medical world, and my wife also did. And I think we just reached a point where we just lost trust in these institutions, and what they're telling us just wasn't working. And in some cases, I experienced more harm than good. So I had to become. I mean, I think it's a common expression is people become their own health advocate. And that's kind of what people say here anyway. I'm in the U.S. in the upper Midwest. So I got Lyme disease, and it really, really messed me up for a few years. And when I initially got it, I went to my doctor, and he just refused to listen to me. We're in an area, or I had visited an area where Lyme disease is really prevalent, and I went camping and came back with screaming tinnitus in both ears, and I couldn't move my finger. It felt like it was about to just break in half, and I had my knee hurt and my elbow hurt, just all out of nowhere. Just one morning, I woke up with all this, so I went to my doctor right away because I was familiar with these are like symptoms, and he would not give me the antibiotics because he didn't see, like, there's this bullseye that you get, a rash that's like a red concentric lines, and the tests for it are really not very accurate. And he said, I remember he said, I just returned from a CDC Lyme conference, so I would know if you had Lyme. So yeah, I haven't trusted the CDC for a while. That was probably 10 years ago or something. So yeah, I didn't trust the CDC before it was cool to not trust the CDC. And yeah, he said I would know if you had it because I was just at this conference, and he said the tinnitus or the tinnitus. He said I was listening to too much loud music, and then the joint pains. He said I was getting older, and I was, I think, 37, so I should have arthritis. I should be able to bend my finger overnight. So just so many experiences with or my wife had, she's had these horrible gut pains for years and years, and they just kept pushing fiber. Oh, it's not working. Oh, you need more fiber. Here's a different type of fiber you can take. If you just add more, it'll work if you just get it to the right level, and it's just, and then there's people with, with the ADA, people with diabetes, like, being told that it's okay to eat sugar and all these things, so we just, I think, both kind of lost trust in these institutions and had to sort of figure out what we're going to do. And that's why I wanted to tell our stories to people, is just because, just out of compassion for people who are suffering and lost and don't know who to trust. And my doctor's telling me to do this, but it's making things worse, or whatever the situation is. I know there are a lot of people suffering with health, and I think a lot of it has to do with just what we consume. It's just, it's sort of something that's like so simple that it can go unchecked.
What happened with you once you started it? Did that take care of the symptoms related to Lyme and stuff?
Right. So I'm kind of jumping around in time a little bit. So what I wanted to mention about the Lyme disease was, so I don't think anyone knew about Carnivore back, or at least to my knowledge, knew about Carnivore back when I had the Lyme. But I fought it for 5 years. But what did happen was that I had to go on 5 antibiotics at once for 9 months. And so this was sort of a doctor who was operating in the allopathic Western medicine realm, but they were sort of specializing in Lyme disease. But the Western medicine's only weapon against Lyme is antibiotics. So, but they knew enough to tell me when I was leaving the office, they're like, if you take anything away from what we just told you about your regimen with antibiotics, it's you cannot have carbohydrates while you're on these, because you can get, a massive gut yeast infection because the antibiotics kill your gut bacteria too. So I was on massive amounts of probiotics while I was taking the antibiotics, and then I had like very little sugar. And I actually went from, I had like a little serving of brown rice or something at the time, and then meat and some vegetable or whatever. And when I started doing that, at the time I was overweight for the only time in my life that I was ever overweight. I always weigh around 160 pounds. I don't know how many kilos that is, and I'm 5'11", and I was up to 200 pounds, which had never happened to me. So I ride a motorcycle, and I remember I have these leather pants, and like racing pants, and I couldn't get them on anymore, and I had like I called it Jim Morrison the later years look. I had like a muffin top with leather pants. It's just not a good look. So yeah, I gained all this weight, and when I went on the antibiotics and stopped eating carbohydrates, I just immediately shrunk. I lost 50 pounds in probably 3 months. I didn't really keep track, but I just went right back down to what I normally weigh just by I didn't exercise or anything. All I did was stop eating corn chips and having, cider, adult beverage ciders. I can't drink beer because of the wheat thing. So anyway, and as a result of just losing all the weight and inflammation, you notice that aches and pains are more likely to go away when there's no inflammation. And so that was kind of a separate battle, but it kind of should have been a clue to, once I stumbled upon carnivore later, it was kind of a clue that oh, well, carbohydrates really, really are doing something. And it's worth paying attention to. And then I think all of the, of course, people think not eating plants is really far out. I think it's really extreme, but I mean, everything is doing something. And if you can know by experience, not just by hearing oh, this is bad, don't do this, but if you know by experience, if I eat a certain thing, I'm much more likely to know what it's doing to me if there's not just attendant chaos in my dietary world, So I had gone through all these experiments of, I was vegetarian for 5 years, probably in my youth. I was vegan for 2 years and was extremely unhealthy. I weighed 120 pounds at my lightest, which was very, very, very thin, and was always cold. I was just obviously weak because I was like skin and bones. And then with all the trying to figure out allergies and the wheat thing, and just so throughout my life, I've always been kind of doing these little experiments with tweaking diet and what does this do and what does that do. The 2 years of veganism was a sort of a moral issue for me, and at the time, and then all the rest of it was sort of trying to dial in why don't I feel good? I just never felt very good. And I'm still I'm like a dirty carnivore, I guess you would say. I think that's kind of a term now, but I'm like 95%, animal fat and animal protein and eggs and shrimp and chicken and whatever. Yeah, even though I haven't been incredibly strict about being just only eating meat, I think probably it's like with anything. I think the more energy you put into something, the more results you're going to get. If you go to yoga twice a month, you're not going to become super flexible. If you do it every single day, you're going to become extremely flexible and strong. So I think it's like with anything. So there are trade-offs. So there are certain things that I just choose to not trade off, so I'm not 110% carnivore, but even so, I've had fantastic benefits. There's like no inflammation on my body. I lost just a little bit. I was never in it for the weight loss or anything, but I did. Actually, both of us lost just, I don't know, 5-10 pounds of just sort of puffiness, and our eyes got whiter. So I had, the last time I had gone to the dentist, I had never, like, a dentist's office was like a medieval torture chamber to me. And it wasn't because of the pain. It wasn't because of pain or the sound of the tools or anything. It was the sound of scraping off tartar. And my gums would bleed, and going to the dentist was never a good scenario. And then I wasn't able, so I had a cavity forming the last time I was at the dentist. And they were like, well, yeah, next time you'll probably have to schedule to fill this cavity and keep an eye on it. And then COVID happened. And then other things happened where I was living at the time, and I wasn't able to go to the dentist for 3 years. And then we moved. And then by the time I finally got to go to the dentist, it had been over 3 years. New place, new dentist, and I went to the dentist, and they got done, and I was like, "You're done?" They're like, "Yeah, your teeth and gums look fantastic. Just keep doing whatever you're doing." And I was like, "I don't have a cavity?" They're like, "No, everything looks great. Your teeth look really healthy." And I was totally perplexed. I was like, "How? I've never heard a dentist say your teeth and gums look fantastic." And I realized, like, oh, I've just been eating meat all the time for like a year now. And I hadn't even consciously chosen to go carnivore. It was more just, like I said, I just kind of the vegetables just weren't ending up on my plate, because I was like preparing vegetables. You always have like the half bag of soggy, gross, sour spinach in the fridge when you go to put the new in and everything. And I was like, I don't want to be cleaning vegetables and chopping all this stuff, and like, you know. And so I had, as a result, and just because Cindy is eating meat all the time, we would just find ourselves eating meat all the time. And that was the only thing that changed, is I was eating tons of meat and animal fat, like that delicious gelatin, like in a slow cooked roast, where you get like the amber colored fat gelatin. It's just like candy. And I had a lower back, a disc issue in my lower back, severe issues for years. It's gone away. That would put me out, for a couple of weeks, once every, probably 3 times a year or something. I mean, it would be really bad. I would always have to be careful. If I lifted something wrong, I'd be like, oh, that's going to be a problem. And now I don't. It's just gone. And I attribute. I don't have any. Obviously, I don't have any. Lab work to show to prove that that's what did it. But I just feel like, because of all the collagen I'm consuming and all the fats and all the amino acids, I think my body just has what it needs to heal itself. I think, all the connective tissue is probably stronger, and like it just doesn't feel weak anymore. I even had like some an X-ray had like degeneration in my disc. It was sort of like flattened on one side, and I haven't gotten a new X-ray, but it doesn't feel like that anymore. It feels totally solid and straight, and then going to the dentist is just like a breeze. They never have to do anything. I used to have to listen to, I would bring big clamshell earphones and listen to like the hardest techno that I could find. Not because I wasn't looking for something to relax me. I was looking for the most notes per unit of time. So, because I wanted it to drown out every sound that I was hearing. So I just wanted like constant sound. And now I don't even have to wear any headphones at all, and they're done in like 10 minutes. Digestion is great. I find myself also just not thinking about food constantly. Um, my wife and I both used to just snack and snack and snack and snack. We always needed to be snacking. And just searching for new snacks and trying to find, what are the ingredients on this snack and is this better? And all these, exotic new oils that they have and different grains from, Bolivia and whatever. But like it was just a nonstop, just conveyor belt into our face of just snacks all the time. And I don't have to, it just doesn't occur to me now. It's like my body, I've learned the difference in experience between an addictive craving and a nutritional need. It's like I know when my body is hungry now, I know it's because I actually need something. Whereas before it was just like a nonstop, just like you want this, you want this, you want this, you want this.
Mm.
And
So if I just jump in, that you just painted this quite dystopian image in my mind of when you said the conveyor belt into your face. I mean, that really feels quite kind of, have you seen the movie Wall-E where, everyone's kind of floating around on a watching TV and they don't have to do anything, don't have to
it's a
move.
big soda, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of that feeling, like that's the next step, floating around, but then you've just got the conveyor belt slamming food into your face as well. It's like, yeah. And
Yeah,
that's kind of how we're conditioned, right?
yeah, and I think it's partly because the food companies know, they hire scientists and chemists to design food so that we want it. And I think in a lot of cases we eat, people just eat for the taste. It's just simple. It's yum, sugar, yum, whatever the flavor profile happens to be. Like, and then we develop emotional connections to food, which, it it's it just seems to be kind of a natural process. We we make associations with things, or it feels good. We get like dopamine from what we eat. And actually, I when I've kind of done intermittent full carnivore, like a month at a stretch. The last time I did it, which like last summer, I felt like superhuman. And just I would just be doing like push-ups in the morning. And I don't exercise. I've never been a person to exercise at all. But I would just be like in the morning, I would just have this urge, like my body just wanted to do something. So I just started doing push-ups just because I could right there. And then it didn't make me tired or fatigued or anything. It just felt like I just had like an endless energy. It didn't happen this last time that I did that, but I don't think I quit coffee this time. And I was also eating goat cheese, which is what made me think of this, like the dopamine in our food. And so like cheese doesn't have some opiate in it.
It's caseins or something, yeah.
Yeah. So I would joke that the goat cheese is my methadone for quitting sugar because you get a little bit of lactose sweetness, And then I just found myself just like shoveling spoonfuls of goat cheese and putting it on everything. But you really do. You physiologically, have responses to foods. And So people eat for, emotionally, and people eat for taste. And I think I always try to think like anthropologically, if you were dropped in the forest 100,000 years ago, uh, are you going to be looking for digging up potatoes, or do you want like a rabbit over a fire? You know, I just think, you go out into a forest and like, it's not like you see a bunch of stuff that you're like, oh, yum. I want to go chomp on that tree or something. And much of what's in the forest will hurt you. There's a lot of plants that'll harm people. And then, sort of conversely, like if animals, I'm not the first to notice this, but I heard it being talked about, but certain animals eat certain things. And if you took a lion and gave it Oreos and Doritos and, sweet tea and whatever, it would become sick and it would die early and be unhappy and unhealthy. And then it's just, there's different animals that eat different things. And if you just replace their diet with such and such, whatever random thing, they'll get sick. And it's funny that it's so normal to us that humans just think they can just eat anything, even if it's some new superfood from the other side of the world and that my body's never been exposed to whatsoever. Like it's odd that we would think that, oh, that's just going to work out great.
That's right. And it's, following on from what you're talking about before, we're the only species that needs to go to the dentist.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So, there's something in that, right?
Right. And it's not even just the sugar either, just on that note, because I was even eating at that time, I was still eating sugar. I just was eating a lot of meat. And so I think even dipping your toe into the carnivore realm can just have some really fantastic effects. And I also think like probably the more ill a person is, the more he or she will be able to notice the effects once things just start to change. It's very the differences are so stark. When you do something drastic, you get a drastic result, and they're good guideposts. When you start to notice things happening, you start to kind of get things dialed in, but it's just people don't have like a proper guide. And so all of us sort of collectively, and different, Dr. Barry and Dr. Chafee and, yourself and the people on your channel are all just sort of helping one another, like helping guide one another through this process. Because I mean, our culture, I'm in the US, and I see a lot of sick people. Just I don't have to go to the hospital to see sick people. There's just people are ill all around me. And it really breaks my heart, because I know in a lot of instances, just the knowledge of how diet affects their whole being, and then the inspiration to try to do something about it. If they just have those two things, like to know that there is something you can do, and to know that it can be done because here's a bunch of people that did it, I think that's really powerful. Yeah, that's why I wanted to talk about this, because it's just seeing my wife go from suffering every day to just all of a sudden a different human. Just a different human was obviously pretty life-changing for us.
Yeah. So, on that point, how would you recommend that someone get started with carnivore?
Situationally dependent. If someone is really ill, it might be, or if you're the type of personality where like you need to be like all or nothing, I think it would probably be good to sort of study up using resources, like listen to a bunch of testimonials from your channel, listen to Ken Berry. I think is fantastic. I think he's a very like he's like a good intro into carnivore. But I think some people probably would benefit from going hard. Just like do it. Like my wife, that was what she did. She was very determined when she really puts her mind to something, like she really goes for it. Other people, I mean, like I have much harder time doing that. So there's like you could sort of do like a slow transition. But I think just starting to eat more meats and fats, and just kind of phasing things out. I mean, I think once you start to realize that you're kind of eating compulsively for flavors, or you're eating compulsively for whatever reason, and you sort of simplify your diet, you just sort of take things out that don't seem necessary and kind of whittle it down to like a manageable approach. I think getting rid of seed oils, I think, is a really good idea for anybody, and that's an easy thing to do. So you just go get some beef tallow instead of vegetable oil, and so that's a big one. And then just incorporating more meat into your diet slowly, I think, works for some people. One thing I would advise for anyone, with the exception of people who are going straight into lion diet, which is, beef, salt, water. But if you're just going into carnivore, where you just kind of eat meat and eggs and beef, butter, bacon, seafood, I think it's really good to have a variety. It's easy to forget when you just talk about, you only eat meat, and you think of it just as one thing. But when I really go hard with it, when I'm just only eating meat, I'm eating steak, I'm eating ground beef, I'm eating chicken with bacon, I'm eating shrimp, I'm eating chuck roast, I'm eating slow cooked barbecue, I'm eating sausage, I'm eating eggs. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can eat. You can eat lamb, you can eat. So I guess that would be a big point that I would make, is to don't forget about variety. You don't have to sit down in front of a cube of a pound of ground beef and just put some salt on it and have a glass of water every night. You'll be miserable. But if you're doing lion diet to heal, this is like a healing modality. If you're doing it to really come out of a deep, profound illness, you might need to be tough, just tough it out, and not give in to wanting some variety of foods. I think another just point of advice would be to treat it like an addiction. And then, some people might not know what it's like to have an addiction, but for example, I, a lifetime ago, used to smoke, and, quitting smoking is really difficult. And I realize in retrospect, if you go without nicotine, it feels like extreme hanger, like being hangry, where you're like so hungry that you're like shaky and like moody, and you'll just snap at anyone. And that's what like a withdrawal from that particular thing feels like. And when you're quitting, if you stop giving your body and all the bacteria that's in your body, you just cut off the sugar supply, there's going to be a disruption. Like there's going to be some havoc. And it might be uncomfortable. You might feel worse for, a few days or whatever. Or you might experience like a flare up of certain symptoms or something. But these are things that people go through, that, people who do testimonials will talk about making it through. People get keto flu, or people just feel, but you come out the other end. and you feel fantastic and everything functions better. You feel lighter, less bogged down, less sleepy, less fatigued. You can just eat. I'll just eat a bunch of like cold steak bites with some salt and water, and I'm just like good to go for hours. Where I used to like stop every 60 minutes and like find something that I wasn't sick of eating yet to, so it's just what seems impossible at first in respect to carnivore is it's really just like it's like anything. It's like lifting weights or yoga or learning how to drive or anything. There's going to be sort of a period of not knowing what you're doing and feeling like you make mistakes or you don't feel good or whatever. But I will say it is worth it to try. It's worth just if you're having any sort of if anything is going on physically or psychologically for that matter, to the point where it's affecting your life, where you've been searching around for a solution that you haven't found, just try this for 30 days. Just see what happens. Just see what happens because it could totally change your life.
So, Scott, is there a way that people can reach out to you? Do you have a website or a YouTube or anything like that?
I don't. I mean, I'm just on Instagram. It's not carnivore related, but I can give you that if you want to put it in the show notes, or if people want to. I really love if just individuals feel compelled for whatever reason, or they resonate with part of what I had to say and want to feel compelled to ask me something. People can feel free to message me, and I really love to help people who are suffering, because I feel like so many people don't need to be suffering as much as they are, and there's always a solution. It's just knowing what the solution is.
Well, I'll put your Instagram in the show notes.
Right.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, Scott. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dave. I love what you're doing here. Just keep on doing what you're doing.